I always thought weddings were about bringing people together. Turns out they can also be a perfectly wrapped excuse to push someone out. My brother Michael didn't even call me. He just sent a message, cold, polished, like it had been reviewed by someone else first. "We just think it's better for the family dynamic if you sit this one out." That was it. No explanation, no space for a reply. I read it 3 times, hoping the words might change, but they didn't. They stung more each time. And I knew, this wasn't just him talking. Emma never liked me. Not in that subtle, civil kind of way, no. Her smiles always felt rehearsed, like she was auditioning for the role of supportive fiancé. From the moment she entered our lives, there was this quiet competition. And now, she'd won. Somehow, she'd convinced him that I didn't belong. The worst part? My parents didn't say a word. They played neutral like it was a chess game, and I was just another piece they could afford to lose. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to check in, to say, "This isn't right." But the silence screamed louder than any words ever could. I wasn't just left out. I was locked out, like I'd become a footnote in my own family. But here's the thing. They cut me out like I didn't matter. What they forgot is that I still know how to cut deeper. I tried to be the bigger person. I really did. I told myself maybe there was some misunderstanding, that maybe Michael was under pressure. But when I called, he didn't answer. Not the first time, not the second. Eventually, I stopped counting. I even left a voicemail, my voice cracking halfway through, saying something stupid like, "I just want to understand." But I never heard back. Nothing. Like I'd been erased, replaced, forgotten. Like our childhood, our bond, none of it meant anything anymore. I started replaying memories in my head, like old home movies, birthdays, Christmases, the time he broke his arm and I stayed up all night holding ice packs for him. And now he couldn't even send a real explanation? Just that stiff, manufactured text? It didn't feel like him. It felt like her. Emma. She was pulling the strings, and Michael. He was just letting it happen. That realization cracked something inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just sadness. That slow, quiet kind that settles in your bones. Everywhere I turned, I felt invisible. My parents didn't want to get involved, as if taking a stand for their daughter was some political act. "Let's not make it worse," my mom said, as if I was the one stirring the pot. No one asked how I was feeling. No one cared that I'd been excluded like some stranger. But exclusion has a way of clarifying things. It shows you who people really are, and who you need to become next. I didn't cry right away. It took a few days. It hit me one morning while I was folding laundry, a shirt Michael had given me years ago, back when we still told each other everything. I held it for a second, and suddenly the tears came fast, hot, and out of nowhere. Not just because I was hurt, but because I felt stupid. Stupid for thinking family meant unconditional love. Stupid for thinking I still had a place at the table. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about what it symbolized. I'd been edited out of their future, and yet, a part of me refused to let go. Not out of desperation, out of principle. I wasn't going to beg to be included in a room where I was clearly unwanted. But I also wasn't going to vanish. I may have been pushed to the sidelines, but I knew this family. I knew its secrets, its soft spots. I knew how to stay quiet, and I knew how to speak when it mattered most. They thought they were done with me. They thought they could plan this perfect wedding, polish it up, and pretend I never existed. But here's the thing. While they were busy pretending, they forgot I was still paying attention. They forgot how good I am at seeing the cracks in a picture-perfect frame. And very soon, I was about to spot one that changed everything. I wasn't trying to torture myself, I swear. I was just curious. That kind of curiosity you get when something hurts, like poking a bruise. So I found myself scrolling through their wedding website late one night, wine glass in hand, telling myself I was just being casually nosy. It was all there, the pastel theme, the mason jar centerpieces, the forced smile engagement photos. And then I clicked on the bridal party tab, and my heart stopped. There he was, in the background of one of the pictures, half-cropped but unmistakable. Thomas, my ex-husband. His arm lightly grazing Emma's back, his face too close to hers. It wasn't just a bad coincidence. It was the kind of closeness that tells a story, one you don't want to read but can't look away from. My stomach turned, not from jealousy, but from recognition. That same look he used to give me. That same look I hadn't seen since before it all fell apart. I froze, fingers hovering over the trackpad. For a second, I told myself it meant nothing. Maybe he was just there. Maybe it was innocent, but something inside me, that little gut instinct that always buzzes when something's off, told me to dig. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for truth. What I didn't realize was just how much truth was buried under those pastel colors and curated smiles. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept seeing that image, Thomas, with that familiar half-smirk, standing just a little too close to the woman who'd helped cut me out of my own family. So I did what anyone does when they can't let go of a hunch. I started digging. Old emails, archived texts, photo backups. Things I hadn't looked at in years. It was like opening a dusty box I'd shoved to the back of the closet, only now the contents didn't look so harmless. At first it was subtle. A message from him saying he was helping a friend with some work stuff, sent around the same time Emma had started popping up at events. A blurry group photo from a holiday party where they weren't quite next to each other, but close enough to raise questions. And then I found the one that broke me. A selfie, her reflection in his sunglasses, smiling, in my backyard, during my marriage. Everything clicked at once. The weird tension, the late nights, the unexplained distance. I used to blame myself for the way things fell apart. Thought maybe I'd been too distracted, too controlling, too emotional. But now I saw it. It wasn't me unraveling the marriage. It was them. Quietly. Carefully. And now, here they were, preparing to walk down the aisle, hoping no one would notice the blood on the hem of her dress. I sat there, surrounded by screenshots and old memories that suddenly looked different under this new light. The truth wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. I'd been the last to know. The loyal wife, the supportive sister, the woman quietly replaced in both roles without a single person warning me. They didn't just betray me, they built a whole new story on top of my ashes. And now they were dressing it up with flowers and matching place cards. I could feel something shift in me. Not rage, not yet, but a kind of eerie calm, like when the wind drops right before a storm. They thought I wouldn't come to the wedding, and they were right. I wouldn't show up and play the role of the jilted sister in the corner, pretending to smile through gritted teeth. But that didn't mean I wouldn't make an appearance. There's more than one way to attend a wedding, especially when you know how the story really started. So I closed my laptop, wiped my eyes, and started to think. Not about revenge, not exactly, but about balance, about truth, about how silence had gotten me erased, and how maybe, just maybe, the truth could get me seen again. I didn't want chaos. That's what people always assume, that when a woman's been wronged, she wants to burn everything to the ground. But I didn't want fire. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to walk into that wedding before Emma did. So I started with the only thing I had left, my voice, and a few very useful contacts I hadn't spoken to in a while. First, I called Hannah, a journalist I'd met through a nonprofit years ago. She owed me a favor, but more than that, she loved a story with teeth. Then came Jason, a wedding photographer who'd once worked my own engagement shoot. He didn't ask too many questions, just said, "Send me what you've got." And finally, there was Melissa, the planner assigned to Emma's big day. She and I weren't friends, But I knew her reputation: efficient, discreet, smart enough to know when to stay quiet and when not to. I laid out the plan in pieces, like a puzzle only I could see. No drama, no public scenes, just exposure. The truth, delivered in a way they couldn't ignore, couldn't twist, couldn't bury beneath wedding cake and champagne. I wasn't looking to ruin anyone's day. I was making sure the right story got told, for once, mine. I spent the next few nights piecing everything together: timelines, screenshots, photos, messages, not just to prove what happened, but to make them feel it. Not in a cruel way, in a real way. I wanted Michael to see what I saw. Not through my eyes, but through the cold, undeniable lens of fact. I wanted him to watch it unfold and realize that this woman he was marrying had once worn two faces, and that one of them had been behind my back. I titled the file, "For Michael. Before you say I do." Simple. Clean. No venom. Just a warning label disguised as a gift. Inside, I arranged everything in a quiet, devastating order. The overlaps in dates, the affectionate texts, the grainy but damning photos. Even a voice note Thomas had left me once, the one where he slipped and mentioned a work dinner that Emma had also somehow attended. It was all there, like puzzle pieces snapping into place, one betrayal at a time. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not out of satisfaction. This wasn't revenge candy. It was more like relief. Like I was finally pushing back against a current that had tried to drown me. I wasn't plotting a takedown. I was giving him a lifeline. If he chose to ignore it, that would be on him. But he'd never be able to say he didn't know. There was a strange kind of peace in the planning. Maybe because for once, I wasn't the one being blindsided. I was the one setting the terms. No screaming matches, no public confrontations, just the truth, wrapped in a digital bow, waiting patiently for its moment. I'd spent so long being quiet, swallowing my pain, shrinking myself so others could stay comfortable. Not this time. This time, I spoke. Not loudly, but clearly enough that they'd have to listen. The delivery would be simple: a small black gift bag, a silver USB drive inside, a handwritten tag that read, "One last look before tomorrow." No signature, no note, just enough intrigue to make sure he'd open it. And when he did, he'd see everything. Not just Emma's lies, but what they cost, what they buried, who they erased to keep their secret safe. If they wanted my silence, they should have married someone without a past. But they didn't. They chose someone who carved her future out of my ruin. And now, whether they liked it or not, I was part of their story again, just not in the way they expected. The rehearsal dinner was held at some overpriced vineyard, the kind of place with string lights, curated playlists, and enough wine to blur the edges of a bad decision. I wasn't there, obviously, but I knew every detail. Jason, the photographer, gave me a quiet update. "She's glowing," he said about Emma. "But it's the kind of glow that dims fast under certain light." I smiled at that. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because masks only slip when no one's expecting them to. Sometime between the toasts and the dessert, the gift bag was placed gently at Michael's seat. No one noticed. That was the point. Quiet. Undeniable. Timed like a heartbeat. He opened it later, alone, probably in a hotel room full of nerves and tuxedo fittings. I imagined his confusion when he pulled out the silver USB, the slow, unraveling curiosity, the decision to plug it in. And then, the silence that would have followed. I'd spent hours crafting that video, not with vengeance, with clarity. It started with their earliest overlap, grew into side-by-side photos from the same nights, lined up like a spreadsheet of betrayal. Text messages that weren't meant to be seen. Her name, his lies, my absence. His face must have changed frame by frame, from confusion to doubt to something colder. That sickening realization that you've been building a future on someone else's betrayal. I don't know exactly how long he watched. Maybe he paused it. Maybe he played it twice. But I know the moment that broke him, the final segment. A simple side-by-side, my wedding photo next to a candid of Emma and Thomas taken during that same week. Her hand on his arm, my name etched in frosting on a cake behind them. And then, in white letters against a black screen, "This is who you're marrying. And this is who she helped destroy." I wasn't there to see his reaction, but I didn't need to be. I know Michael. He's slow to process, but once something lands, it lands hard. He doesn't scream. He doesn't punch walls. He shuts down. Retreats inward like a turtle under fire. I imagined him staring at that screen long after the video ended, replaying conversations, reinterpreting memories, rewriting every timeline he'd been fed. And part of me ached for him, because even after everything, the silence, the rejection, the way he ghosted me, I still loved him. He was my brother. And no matter how much I tried to harden myself, a small part of me still wanted him to be okay. But not at my expense. Not again. If this shattered something for him, then maybe it needed to be shattered. Maybe it was never whole to begin with. The rehearsal was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to toast the future, clink glasses, take perfect photos in soft lighting. But instead, it became the beginning of a reckoning. The whispers started early the next morning. Jason told me Emma looked pale, jumpy, her smile just a bit too forced. Michael barely made eye contact with anyone. Something had cracked. And cracks, no matter how deep you bury them under vows and florals, eventually reach the surface. I didn't hear from Michael that night. Not a word. But I didn't need validation. I hadn't done this to win. I'd done it to wake him up, to remind him who I was, not the forgotten sister, not the passive observer, but the one person in his life who once would have done anything to protect him, and who still did even now in a way he never saw coming. They thought they could plan a perfect wedding without ghosts, but the thing about ghosts is, they show up, especially when you pretend they don't exist. And while they toasted to forever, I'd already changed what tomorrow looked like. The wedding didn't happen, or maybe it did, in some fragmented, hollow version of itself. I never asked for the details. I just know the venue posted a cancellation notice that morning, and Emma's Instagram went dark. No more countdowns. No more filtered excitement. Just silence. The kind that says everything. I sat on my porch with coffee in hand, watching the sky shift from gray to gold, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Michael finally called. Not to apologize. Not at first. Just to lash out. "How could you?" he asked, voice sharp and broken all at once. I didn't yell back. I didn't justify. I just said, "Because I love you, even when you didn't protect me." That shut him up. For a second, I thought he'd hang up, but he didn't. He stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that lets truth settle in the cracks. I could hear him breathing, heavy, uneven, like the weight of it all had finally dropped. Maybe he was replaying every time he'd looked the other way. Maybe he was realizing that betrayal doesn't always come with red flags and fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in soft lies and polite smiles. I didn't need him to forgive me. I just needed him to see. And in that silence, I think he finally did. Emma, of course, went into damage control mode. I heard from someone, a mutual friend of a friend, that she tried spinning the story. Said the photos were taken out of context, that I was unstable, jealous, even obsessed, classic deflection. But the thing about truth is, once it's seen, it can't be unseen. My family wasn't rushing to defend her this time, not after everything. Not with the timeline in their faces and the lies unraveling thread by thread. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match in a parking lot. Just the slow, uncomfortable shift in how people looked at her. Trust, once cracked, doesn't glue back cleanly, especially not when the fracture runs through someone's wedding vows. I didn't need to show up in a gown or crash the ceremony. The truth had walked in on its own, and it knew exactly where to sit. As for me, I didn't return to the shadows. I'd lived there long enough. Instead, I wrote, not about them, not directly, but about what it means to be cut out, to be the one left behind, erased, silenced. I published the piece anonymously, just a simple blog post about family, betrayal, and the invisible grief of still being alive while people act like you're gone. I didn't expect much, but people found it, and it spread. The blog went viral within days. Not because it named names, but because it touched a nerve. Strangers, mostly women, many my age, flooded the comments. This is my story too. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for putting it into words. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I'd let others bury. And now, finally, I wasn't just someone with a painful past. I was someone with a voice. Michael hasn't said much since that call. But I think about him sometimes, about the version of us that existed before all this. I don't know if we'll ever get back to that. Maybe we're not meant to. Some relationships don't heal. Some just shift into something quieter, more distant, but more honest too. And that's enough for now. They didn't invite me to the wedding. They made it clear I wasn't welcome. But in the end, I delivered something no one could ignore. Not a speech, not a toast. Just a truth sharp enough to change the narrative. And while they were busy planning a perfect day, I gave them a moment they'd never forget.